This is excellent. I can't hear you, though.
We will. Can you hear?
I can hear you now. Perfect. Hey, there's Anthony. Hey, buddy. How are you, man? This is good. All right. So should I just?
Excellent. No, we're we're going to be sharing the stage. We have actually somebody in auditorium live as well.
Okay.
From Proximity, Rene. Hang on. Let me see if I can put Rene on screen. And
how are
you guys can do an intro.
Yeah, I'm still figuring out the hand gestures here. There we go.
All right. I'm Rene Rouleau. I work at Proximity Canada. I'm an ACD there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
And that's Kip Voytek.
Nice to meet you, Kip.
Nice to meet you, Rene. Should I just stay on until everyone else joins, or?
Yeah, we're going to come. Everybody should come on in about 10 minutes from now, so you can just hang in here. And I guess we could have a discussion.
Well, Rene had already started out, so you can listen in on Rene, and if you want to pipe in at any point, Kip, please do.
Or you can just ignore me, Kip.
No,
Totally
no.
fine.
I'm putting on the headphones here. I'll be ready to jump in.
All right. So like I was saying, there's these kind of check boxes that I look to check off when I'm coming up with an idea that might be award worthy. And one of them is, has it ever been done before? So like I said, I Googled the cement truck advertising, and there was one really lame breast cancer. They wrapped the cement truck in pink, but it had nothing to do with the medium itself. And what I mean by that is, you know, a cement truck is very unique. It has a unique motion on the street, and they didn't leverage that at all. They just wrapped the stupid cement truck in pink for breast cancer, and like the drum doesn't even look like a breast, for Pete's sakes. It has nothing to do with anything. So once I Googled that and discovered, well, it looks like no one else has really done anything that uses and utilizes that motion, then I knew I was onto something. And so that's one of those examples, actually, where I was in Chicago with my family, and I saw a cement truck that was ribbon striped, and the motion of that ribbon stripe I just thought was beautiful and really eye-catching. And my next thought was, well, how can I exploit the shit out of that for advertising purposes, right? So it sat in my head. Honest, I'm not kidding you. For 2 years, I kept trying to find the right client to fit that. Like, there's a Danone yogurt, and it's a shakeable yogurt, and the shape actually looks like that drum. And I was kind of like, well, that works, but just I can't explain it. It didn't feel right. And then I stumbled into the fact that the Smart has the smallest turning radius, like just by accident, just by being online. And we have that as a client. And I was like, well, this is perfect. So literally, it wasn't even my account, and presented to client within 10 minutes. His only question was, can we do 2 cement trucks instead of 1? So, you know, it's good to develop relationships with clients, but sometimes the idea just speaks for itself, and it's just perfect. So that's that. The other thing is, though, you know, again, using that same example, is it relevant to the brand? Well, in this case, it's extremely relevant to the brand because the Smart car is one of the smallest vehicles out there, next to the Mini. And it actually fit size as on that cement truck drum, like fit size as. It's one of the only cars that can do that. And it had the smallest turning radius, which paid off a benefit directly. Oh, hey. Say again? No. Yep, I store it. I try to store it here. And sometimes I store it in a file folder. I have a file folder of just ideas that I don't know what to do with, and just looking for a marriage to a client to the right fit.
Can you hear me when I'm speaking?
Can you hear me when I'm speaking?
I can definitely hear Rene, and I hear a few of the voices in the back.
Yeah. Right. So where was I? Yeah.
So Kip, one of the questions from the students was the idea of keeping a log of ideas that can come to life for a client or that can come to life. Do you do that same kind of thinking in your processes of like ideas that can just sort of sit in sort of the hopper and blend in your process?
Yeah, I think I've, can you hear me okay? A little thumbs up? Okay. I think on a personal level, I do it much, much better than I did 3 years ago. And at an institutional level, I've seen a lot of agencies start to create idea banks where just anything that comes out of a brainstorm, we started this at RJ back in 2002. We noticed in communication arts, all these winning ideas. You would hear the creative director say almost exactly what Rene said, which is, we've had this idea for 2 years. We were trying to find the right client to do it with. So we started capturing them in a pre-wiki style database that was accessible online, and then I pretty much just grab lots and lots of stuff on Evernote, and I tag things pretty diligently, and I've been doing it for about 2 years, and it can create some interesting associations. So yeah, I keep some of those, and it's exactly what Rene describes. Like, there's got to be something to this. You just got to wait for the right brand, the right person, or in some cases also just the right time and the right problem. I've had some ideas that when I had Nike as a client, that over the course of 3 years, we brought it up to them 3 times, and it wasn't until the 3rd time that the technology and the audience was ready for it.
I think that's a really interesting point. I'm fascinated to know, my God, what kind of tags would you put to things? Because sometimes you just don't even know how it's going to really work or what client's going to work with.
Well, part of the thing that's cool with Evernote, and Stephen Johnson, his book Where Good Ideas Come From, talks about Devon Think. It actually recognizes the text. So sometimes I'll just tag them as ideas, and then within ideas I can search for something. So in a lot of cases, just using the words that are in the idea. And then the other thing, to really answer your question, though, is I tag a lot around behaviors. My creative chops are strictly on the digital side, so I've never done TV spots or anything. So there's a lot around, is it a game idea, is it a play idea, is it a communication idea, is it a networking idea? So tags around behaviors work for me. And cool. Someone named Laurent has joined us.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hey there.
One more.
So we'll do one sort of quick, do we have somebody else joining online in a second? Okay. So we don't want to have to do it too many times, so we'll wait for the next person for the formal introductions.
Sure.
Hi, this is Anthony Calumet. I'm one of the professors and program chair here at Seneca. Thank you for joining us this
That's my pleasure.
Number
Thanks for having me.
And the conversation that you joined us in, and we'd certainly love your opinion on it, is the concept of idea banks, where you see something and you don't know who to apply it to quite yet. You don't have a client. How do you go about that process of keeping ideas in the hopper, letting them ferment for a while before you might find the client it'll fit for?
I do it all the time. It's sort of the process that you go through in advertising is coming up with a good idea. Actually, usually doesn't have a particular client in mind for me. So I've got tons of back pocket ideas that I file away either in my phone or in a filing cabinet next to me in my desk. And sometimes you work at an agency where something becomes appropriate, and you can pull that thing out and show it to a creative director and be like, well, I think this is an idea that could work. But oftentimes what I end up doing is finding an idea and trying to find an appropriate client, and then creating some spec work and actually taking that to a creative director, and hopefully being able to find an appropriate client to work with. I mean, you may have some ideas, but and sometimes those people aren't necessarily willing, but other times, you can find the perfect client and end up doing some really creative or interesting work. For me, a lot of my favorite work, a lot of the stuff that I've done that I like the most, has always been for the clients that we don't necessarily have in-house, the people that we go out and source in order to bring them something interesting or something they may not have heard of before. So as far as an idea bank, I suppose I am an idea bank, and I'm full of things that I've come up with in the past that I've never been able to use. The hope is that you get to, pull those out once in a while and actually do something interesting with them.
Hey, one other piece that I might add, just that this sparked was off of that digital jag that I went on, was there's also a lot around having an environment where people are tinkering and playing and experimenting, because one of the things that's tricky now is we know what a lot of classic advertising ideas look like,
Sure.
but a lot of digital ideas may not be so easy to recognize. And we used to have fairly frequently ideas that came out of people just trying to learn a new API, or someone was reading a chapter, in Flash when Flash was current, or when people are retooling themselves for HTML5 now, and just playing with something to try and learn it. They have an interesting idea, and you would see it over their shoulder and say, hey, so-and-so did this, and then suddenly it becomes a concept. So I think there's that other piece, too. You might not be able to store them as easily, but that idea of keeping that kind of stuff highly visible. Someone drives a robot past your desk that's doing something kooky. Being able to capture that could turn into a digital idea.
Sure. Do a lot of people drive robots by your desk? That's really interesting. Where do you...
At one of our agencies, Crispin Porter, there was a 3-month period where they were just building lots and lots of robots, and it turned into their company Christmas card, and they wound up doing it with some fun sensor things outside. But it really all started as we just want to know what this technology is.
Sure.
And it was it started out fairly pedestrian, then it turned into a fair number of ideas.
Amazing.
I think also, I don't know if all of us are digital or not. I'm kind of all over the place, but I think it's just most interesting, and one of the things I tell people in my department is just always keep your ears open. So it's a little bit of that too, which is what you were talking about with the robots. They're just always there, but I would go so far as to say even reading simple things like Fast Company, the Daily News, you actually get exposed to new things as well and innovations that you can possibly glom onto and adapt and steal for yourself.
That's absolutely true. I think the FWA is a really great example of a place that you can go for that kind of digital inspiration. Stealing is one thing, but being inspired is another. And there's always people ahead of the curve who are doing something interesting or perhaps something that you haven't heard of. For the most part, the things I'm most interested in now are digital concepts that provide utility. So something that kind of attaches to your life and doesn't necessarily make you do anything different than you already do, but somehow rewards you for a behavior that you already take part in. And digital is great with that. There are all sorts of apps that allow you to kind of partake in whatever you usually do with your life, but reward you for that behavior in some interesting way. And you can attach brands to that if you want to. But I think that's sort of the new direction for digital, and that's the kind of thing that I look for when I go to a site like the FWA, or when I read Fast Company, or when I read Wired. It's all about how can I enhance someone's life through a digital application of some sort, and then try to attach that, if you can, to a brand or to an idea that a brand is trying to sell, and you've got yourself something that's really interesting and really and that's easy to download. You don't have to worry about that being downloaded. You don't have to worry about selling that because it fits your life. You want it naturally, and it just so happens that it's attached to a brand or a brand idea.
The other thought you struck or sparked for me too was this idea of we're pretty familiar with immersing ourselves in the category and the product that our brand lives in. Hey, there's Hunter.
Hey, Kip.
Are you having your lunch? Is that why your tie's thrown back?
Having my tea, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'll just finish the thought, and then that might be all of us. But one of the pieces, so we're all pretty familiar with, you immerse yourself in the category that your brand lives in. But one of the other interesting things, and this sort of ties back to that Stephen Johnson book, is immersing yourself in adjacent categories. And one of the most productive things that I had at the last agency I worked at is we were working on a weight loss product and trying to create a Weight Watchers-like program for them. And what got really interesting to us and our most inspirational place to get new ideas was actually looking at people with diabetes, because it's a transformational place. Their lives are generally changed, and it tends to be a positive improvement even though they have a condition. And they had a different kind of approach that wasn't like the skinny jeans kind of thing. And that actually became a more interesting place to get ideas for digital concepts and even for the emotional motivation than the original category, especially when you're looking for something that's fresh and hadn't been done before. You can find a disruptive idea from another category.
Yeah, I think we're also talking about utility, finding digital apps and whatnot that have utility. I think there's also another trend that I'm noting out there. I don't know if you guys are noticing it too, but I think it was Ariel laundry detergent did something where, I just termed it DigiReal, which is a really stupid term, but it's basically when digital impacts real. And I'm just noticing that trend kind of happening out there. The one that comes to mind is actually it was about 3 months ago. There was one where you could sign up, and so they captured data, which is good for them. And you had the opportunity to shoot a bullet in a truck for real. Does anyone know that one?
I do remember that. I have no idea what the brand was. Oh, you know what? Was that for a video game? Was that Twisted Metal?
You're right. It was. Yeah. So I mean, I literally signed up because I just wanted the chance to like hit a key and get that experience of actually a bullet going into a truck as a result of me hitting a key. So I think that's really interesting too. And Ariel did it as well. I think it was in Europe, guys. I can't remember, but it was where you again could shoot food stains onto white T-shirts, and then of course Ariel did a demo within a glass box in a train station, I think. But the idea being you're online and you get to try and shoot these moving white T-shirts that are going back and forth to stain them.
BMW did a very similar execution with their virtual test drive, where you actually had the ability to drive a BMW vehicle around a test track using your keypad on your computer. So again, another really interesting way of kind of interacting with the real world, through the digital space.
Cool. What else do you guys want to talk about? Okay. Sure. Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. And I can hand the mic to you.
Good. We're still waiting for one more gentleman to join us from locally from Toronto, but I guess this would be a good time to, have everyone maybe do the real introduction. I know we've done them one by one as people signed in, but now that we have the four of you, and when Ron Tite goes in, we'll just say, here's Ron, and that'll be it. So let's start off with Hunter.
Hi. Thanks for hosting, and thanks for having me. My name's Hunter Tura. I'm the president and CEO of Bruce Mao Design, headquartered with a satellite branch in New York City. We're a multidisciplinary creative agency, hopefully or ideally developing innovative design solutions for a series of best-in-class brands worldwide. Is that okay?
Excellent. So,
is that me? Is it my turn?
Yeah.
My name's Laurent Abesdris, writer at Juniper Park in Toronto, which is a division of BBDO and a subsidiary of the conglomerate Omnicom, which is the most ominous name ever created. I've been in the industry for about 7 years. Juniper Park is a full-service agency. I began my career as a digital creative, working exclusively in digital media. But now I'm a full-service creative, creating TV, print, 360 campaigns, things like that. So, hello, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Kip?
Hi, I'm Kip Voytek. I'm the SVP Director of Digital Innovation at MDC, which is the network that Bruce Mao Design is part of. I usually frown when I mention my title, Digital Innovation, because I hate that word. And when I got my contract letter and I saw it, it's just like, I've kind of cringed. But I figured, well, other people seem to be making decent money with that title, so I guess I'll take it. But the idea is I mostly have a background as a computer game designer, and then I spent several years as a creative director in ECD at RGA, where I worked on Nike and a couple other accounts. And so my role is to sort of work with our agencies to help them figure out the digital path. Sometimes that's organizational, sometimes it's process, sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's talent. Then I also just spend a little bit of time working with our M&A group on investments in interesting technologies that we might want to invest in, or companies that we might want to partner with. And we have Ron here now.
Excellent. And Rene, one last time for an introduction to the... Oh. Yep, hang on one sec.
Hey guys, one last time with feeling. I'm the dark, ominous creature with the bald head. It's Rene Rouleau here and I work at Proximity Canada. I'm Associate Creative Director there. So Juniper Park, hi, how you doing?
How you doing?
Omnicom rules. I don't know. I'm just making that up. It is ominous, though. You're right. Yeah, and I've been ACD there for about 3 years, and I've been at Proximity Canada for about 5.
And good afternoon, Ron. It's Anthony. How you doing?
I'm great, Anthony. How are you doing?
Excellent. So we can do an introduction to the whole panel now that we're all assembled, and we've already started with some conversations and discussions. So welcome to Seneca and Creative Advertising's Seneca Asks Hangout.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So a little intro, Ron, for our other panelists.
Oh, sure. I'm coming to you live from my house. I just moved, so I had to oversee some work being done here. So it's nice to take a break from that. I am the president and chief creative officer of the Tite Group, a massive, massive agency in Toronto that is right now about 5 or 6 people and growing every day. But prior to starting my own agency about 6 months ago, I was the executive creative director at Euro RSCG for about 5 years, I guess, in Toronto. And like many before me, decided to, I was just frustrated with the way things were going, not specifically at that agency, but just in general, and wanted to, do it my way. And so I guess doing it my way is talking to you on a Tuesday from my home office.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panelists, again for coming. I gotta just be amazed by the way we can bring technology into the classroom like this. And I go back as little as 2 years ago, and Kip, I'd have to bring kids to New York to learn from you, and everybody else. It took quite an adventure. So this is just marvelous, and so thank you again for joining us. So we do have some questions from the students, and the way the format basically works is they may direct it to one individual, and then the rest of you can pipe in, or it can be a generic question and jump in who may think they have the answer for us or who can make a contribution to us. So our first question is from Cressida.
Hey guys. Oh, I'm right over here. Hello. I have a question. Sorry, yeah, I have a few questions. So many to ask, but I can only ask one, I suppose. I guess just a general for the whole panel. Feel free to jump in anytime, but just kind of curious, how would you define what makes a person creative in the business? And maybe you can add in your opinion as to how that might look like down the road in the future. Is that a heavy one?
Deep.
Well, I'll go. One of the things that I do in my role, which is maybe different than other design organizations, is I've taken a kind of radical degree of interest and engagement in the acquisition of talent, and it really has to do with what we talk about here is really trying to drive a 21st century business model, and we call it the Avengers model, where it's really a curated team of global superstars to really drive innovative outputs for our clients. But creativity is a kind of key component, obviously. I mean, I guess if you're hiring a manager or something, actually that's not true. We even want creative deal makers and creative managers. But I was lucky enough early in my career to have worked with the architect Rem Koolhaas, and he had this notion that I think for me is really at the core of creativity, which is this idea of strategic ignorance, meaning you don't have to be an expert in absolutely every platform or channel that you're kind of being asked to design for, but ideally you have the kind of curiosity and the tools to ask the right kinds of questions around that, which then allow you to open up a whole set of possible scenarios And so for me, that's really at the heart of creativity. It's something that I actively look for in the people that I hire and the people we talk to about coming to work for us. So in a way, it's counterintuitive to talk about ignorance as being at the heart of creativity. But I think that degree of humility, knowing when you don't know something, is also a really kind of critical factor in terms of driving, creative or innovative responses.
I would actually, I would agree with that. I think that the more creative a person is, the less streamlined they are in their way of thinking. I think that in order to be a good creative, you absolutely need to be able to attack a particular creative problem from multiple angles. And that's something I don't think I was particularly good at when I first started, but something that I've actually learned to be better at as I've grown as a copywriter. As you probably all know, you can give a group of people a brief, and you can have 1,000 different answers to that brief, 1,000 different ways to attack a particular creative problem. But as an individual, you need to be able to know that and appreciate that about yourself too. I think a creative person and a good creative advertising professional will probably have that skill, be able to look at a problem from many different ways, ignore where they were a second ago, and be able to jump to another place, another time, and be able to kind of excavate an idea based on that way of thinking as well.
I agree with both, but I think there's a reality as well that exists that sadly sometimes creativity is defined by the place where you're paid to be creative, and so everybody's in. The students are in Toronto, so Tien and Lax would define creativity very differently than Leo Burnett would, and they would define it very differently from Totem, custom publishing. And at the end of the day, if you look at what Amex has done with their syncing your credit card with Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, that's an incredibly creative solution. It didn't come, I don't think it came from a writer or an art director. And the definition of creativity is changing, but our industry still likes to put that stamp that a creative person is either a writer or an art director or a designer. And while there may be opportunities for other people to be creative, they're still not part of a creative department. And when you look client-side at places like Facebook and Google and whatnot, those places are filled with incredibly creative people who don't have creative in their titles. And I think that's where we as an industry have to get to.
Sure. I would agree with that. There's nothing better, especially when developing creative concepts for digital, to have people who call themselves creative technologists, or to have Flash developers, or to have back-end coders involved in the process of the brainstorming process right from the onset, because they bring with them a form of creativity that I lack completely. I don't have that. I don't have that skill set. So when formulating ideas, I realized that the traditional model is to have an art director and a copywriter sit in a room and come up with a whole bunch of ideas. But that needs to change, and I believe is actually slowly changing as people realize that the form of creativity that we need to sort of push digital boundaries isn't going to necessarily come from an art director or a copywriter team.
Yeah. Kip, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the quick piece that I was going to throw in, I like the Avengers piece that that Hunter brought up, not only because it's nerdy, but it sort of highlights one of those things of there's this combination of specialized skills plus being a generalist that IDEO talks about with a T-shaped person. And I think that's one of the hardest things to find in the industry now, because you have a lot of places where people are really strong at the bottom of the T, or they don't have a bottom of the T and they don't know how to talk to other disciplines. And go back to that idea of diabetes being akin to weight loss, or what's the category that's next to mine, or the space that's akin to mine. And for me, when I'm hiring creative directors, I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for is curiosity. I'm always very nervous about people who think they have the answers, they have a pat way of approaching something, or they have a simple 30-second summary of what something is, because in my 10 years, I don't think I've seen anything last more than 9 months that I've said at a conference that I haven't had to take back a year later. So I think that whole thing of just being curious and open and working with other disciplines is really key.
I love what you said about curiosity, because I think that is key. And I think the enthusiasm around that curiosity as well. I'm going to I'm gonna just butcher this quote, but I hope all of you follow Lee Clow's Beard on Twitter, and he had one, and I am gonna butcher it, but it was something like, "How can you expect the world to listen to you if you're not listening to the world back?" And I think that's just so key. Again, I talked about reading Facebook, just or Fast Company, and even down to reading the stupid Metro news on the subway. Yeah, it's really light and it doesn't go deep, but it goes broad. And by reading the Metro newspaper, again, organically, you stumble into things that you never would have actively sought, and as a result, you might discover new things. So I think that's really, I think that's the essence of the creative. The other thing I wanted to say was it is a different room now. It's not an art director and a writer. It's an art director, a writer, and a creative technologist 100% every time.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of agencies that consciously, we spent a lot of time, this is where I originally met Anthony, spent a lot of time teaching sort of digital foundation stuff to agencies. And we've started to see some agencies move into a place where they actually set up different types of team. They say, okay, this really feels like a TV solution. We're going to give that to art and copy because they still do that best. And frankly, I'm not the kind of person you want in that kind of brainstorm. This feels like a digital kind of thing. So we're going to have an interaction designer and an art director and a programmer. This feels like we don't know what it is, so we're going to find people that work together really well. And I think that's that other notion of like just being agile, which is finding people that can, go into problems without knowing what the solution is at the end of it, and being open to all the pieces around them, because I think the industry is still full of a lot of hammers looking for nails.
Yeah, we have a philosophy which I think relates to that in some way, which I stole from Bill Belichick, who's the coach of the New England Patriots. But they have this philosophy: draft the player, not the need. And so what that means is, we take a pretty activist approach to getting the best available person, and then they may be not, I don't want to say playing out of position for a period, but it's funny how when you get really amazing talent, the opportunities have a way of kind of presenting themselves because of that person being in your organization. And when Kip talks about hammers and nails, it's like I'd rather be in the sort of die making business, like customizing our approaches for the opportunities that are at hand.
We have another question from Jill Pearson.
Hi. I think you can. Hi, good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
It is a bunch of dudes. Where are the women?
It's a bunch of dudes. It's a dude panel. So one of the reasons why this whole session got started, it stemmed from our career class and starting our internship. So a lot of us are in that process right now of finding where we're going to be for the next few months, hopefully ends up in a career and all of that as well. Could you comment a couple minutes each maybe on what your experience breaking into the industry was, and if there's anything that you did that you really wish you didn't do, to maybe send it our way, just to give us a little of your life experience in the place that we're starting from right now.
Yeah, I can kick that off because I got in quite accidentally, and I was working at, as an account guy and a very basic HTML programmer back in 1997, when people were still using Adobe PageMail to do that, for those of you who are around. And we were the digital agency, or digital shop that I was a part of was a partner of a traditional agency. And the chairman asked if I ever thought of getting into advertising, and I said, no, not really. And he said, well, look, being an account person in advertising is basically making a list and checking it off. But it does make sense. It does make sense. Let me explain. That the only question is, are you smart enough to know what goes on the list? And are you ambitious enough to do it so that you can check it off? And that's it. And when you think about it, for a lot of careers out there, that really is what it's all about. Are you smart enough to know what goes on the list? Are you ambitious enough to check it off? And I did that. And so I was an account guy and ran the Intel business. And then I was a stand-up comedian and really wanted my comedy life and my advertising life to be closer together. And so I walked into the president's office one day and said, I had a horrible experience while I was performing in Edmonton where I almost died in a hotel fire. And I told him that my life flashed before my eyes and account services sadly did not make the final cut. And I wanted to get into the creative department. And I would take a pay cut to do it. And I did. I moved 1 week later into the creative department and started writing. And it was one of those, I'm going to take a step back because this is about something I really want to do and something I'm really good at. And so I didn't ever have a book. I didn't show a book, and it's horrible. I know for all of you who are doing that right now, I just kind of stumbled into it. And then once I was in, the pressure was on because I had to stay there. And so I really had to perform, and I worked my ass off to make sure that nobody ever said I wasn't good enough to stay.
One thing that, oh, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I actually have kind of a similar story because my entrance into the job was sort of non-traditional as well. I was supposed to be a lawyer. My Jewish grandmother wanted to be a lawyer. My mom wanted a lawyer. I got into law school. All of that was supposed to happen. And about 6 months before leaving university, I had a friend who had become an art director at Young & Rubicam and who I was talking to about what he was doing. I decided that that's what I wanted to do as well. I had written all through university. I had written for the school paper and for various other publications throughout Halifax where I went to school. And when I decided I was going to be a copywriter, I literally picked up a phone book and looked up advertising agencies online, or sorry, through the phone book in Halifax, and ended up giving Cossette Atlantic a call on numerous occasions. It didn't happen overnight, but eventually they let me come in and shadow a copywriter, which is essentially what I asked. I didn't ask for an internship or a job. I just asked if I could come in and learn what a copywriter does and get some experience with that. And after about 5 months of doing that, it turns out I had a little bit of a portfolio put together. So that became my internship through just sort of lucking out and giving these guys a call and wanting it enough. They let me stick around and do a little bit of work, which eventually got produced. And from there, the story just kind of naturally unfolds. I ended up moving back to Toronto and getting a job at Cossette in Toronto and moving on to Taxi and now being at Juniper Park where I am. But it is all about the perseverance. I mean, I think, and I've spoken to a lot of young creative people about it, as far as getting that job you want, you really do need to keep in mind who's doing the work that you like. Why are they doing the work that you like? Who are the people in charge of the work that you like? And how do I get my name in front of that person? Because that's the place that I want to end up. So I would say the perseverance is all about, and it's all about really getting there by knowing what you want and going after that one particular agency or two that you're really interested in.
So I wouldn't say that my thing is more important than those two, because those actually sound much more important. But I think one of the things that I find myself when I'm giving coaching or just talking to people is learning to be aware of the shift and the variety of mental models that we have in the industry. One of the biggest things I think that's happened since 2004 is, if you think about this industry from 1950 to 2004, and I'm picking one date arbitrarily, 2004 is the year when people spent more hours on the internet than they did watching TV. We pretty much had a very fixed mental model. TV spots were our most powerful weapon. They were the most effective thing that we had, and we had decades to perfect this form. In the last 8 years, we're all struggling to figure out what's going on. Whether you're a social media guru or whatever it is, it's all changing really fast. And whether you're talking to clients, whether you're trying to sell ideas to a team, whether you're trying to figure out how to get your ideas heard within an agency, it's really important to try and to develop this skill of understanding where they're coming from, how they're seeing things, and what's the mental model that they're operating under, because I just see so many places where digitals and traditionals talk past each other, where clients think they've asked for one thing, they've briefed for another, and they're expecting something entirely different, and the agency's giving them the fourth thing. And that seems like one of the biggest challenges. I think everything else is like getting in the door, but there is this thing of like once you're there, to be ready for people just seeing this world in multiple different ways, and maybe even changing from hour to hour.
Yeah, so I think that's good advice to, for sure, once you get in the door. Going back to how you get in that door, my best advice is A, you're going to drive yourself insane if you call every single one of the things, these don't call them interviews, call them appointments, or you'll just kill yourself. Yep. That was my cardinal rule. Like when I was going out and visit, meeting creative directors with my book, which was very sad at the beginning and fortunately got better, but I called them appointments, not interviews, because it would just kill me. And the other thing that was really it was a big moment for me was I actually kind of gave up for about 2.5 years because I went to Japan and taught English, which was a good experience in itself. But when I came back, I kind of dusted off my portfolio, didn't add a single thing, but I took out about 5 or 6 things, shot my book around, and within 2 weeks, boom, I got a job. So that really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that it wasn't that my book sucked. It was just that I didn't have the objectivity to pull out the crap that was dragging the rest of it down. So I think that's a really poignant moment. So gestation periods are very important. Maybe not 2.5 years, but they're important.
Well, we stole Mark Parker's dictum of edit to amplify here. So I mean, we talk a lot about the removal of content to make your point even more powerful, and it's something that certainly see. When I look at student work or the work of young professionals, like hook them in the first 20 seconds with your best stuff, and edit out anything that weakens that. If they want more, they'll ask for more. But kind of leave them wanting more, as opposed to, by page 72 of a PDF, be like, okay, I got it. This is your packaging designed for Lipton iced tea. It's like, okay. So I mean, I think
somebody in the room is freaking out right now because they've done a package designed for Lipton iced tea.
And it's on page 72.
Yeah.
I know who you are, Bob. Right. I guess now that I hijacked your comments, I mean, I was recently in Saudi Arabia, and I had the kind of weird, I don't know what to call it, honor or experience of being with a prince, one of the members of the royal family, and we were talking about school and where I was educated, and I had the really amazing opportunity to do my design work at Harvard, and he asked me, what did I study at Harvard? And I was like, well, I learned basically 2 things there. The first was network, and the second was ambition. And so I was really interested in Ron's comment before about having the ambition to check off the list. I think network and ambition combined with humility and enthusiasm have a really powerful way of transcending the blind spots in your portfolio or the blind spots in your work. Not everyone is going to have, everything in their experience, and not everything is going to be amazing. But we were talking before a little bit about the changing nature of collaborative teams, and it's like, if you're a kind of versatile player, you're enthusiastic about it, the ambition is clear that you want to help drive, both results for the clients and the organization you're going to, you'd be amazed at, how much more willing employers are to plug you into the situation, give you a chance, than, people who may have just exceptional work but are difficult to deal with.
Hi, gentlemen. Sorry. Hi, my name is Navid, and I have a question about the more creative process, how you come up with ideas, because the technology changing. So, for example, you have an idea that we're going to work with something that you just saw in TED. Do you take it to someone or you decide, oh, let me come up with a bunch of ideas around the same concept, then show it, or no, you have the technology in mind and then you decide the idea?
Tough one. I think the answer to that question is probably that you shouldn't have a technology in mind and try to force fit an idea into that technology. You should usually be working with the brief itself and trying to figure out what the right way to what's the word I'm looking for? The right way to enunciate an idea. And if that technology happens to match, if that technology happens to enforce the kind of idea that you're trying to put across, then it's the right thing to do. I've seen a lot of creatives, and even in my time tried to do that myself, which is to come up or see an interesting technology and just try to force fit something into it and sell it to a client. That's not usually the right way to go. What you really need to be doing is getting a brief and trying to find the right ways to make that brief sing and to make that particular creative concept work. Force fitting never works, in my opinion. I've never seen it happen in my experience.
And I think you should also, I mean, I always hesitate, and when we do some of these digital works pieces, talking about technology, if you're not actually talking about a behavior or talking about an environment, is probably getting off to a bad start. The idea of like, oh, this thing is cool. I used to call this the Business Week cover syndrome. Something would show up on the cover of Business Week, and I would go to my office on Monday, and for sure a client would call and say, oh my God, we got to be there. As soon as something had 1 million people. Yep. And there was no sense of why do we need to be there, what is the environment, is it conducive to decision making, is it useful to the brand, but just that sense that you've got to be there. So I think the big piece is you see some technology and you decide, is it a platform that you can put content on? Is it an environment that people are doing interesting things in? Or are there behaviors that can, you know, to tap on Laurent's idea, you know, are there behaviors that can be created there? And that's the way you need to start to view technology in this space, because otherwise you're kind of chasing trends. You know, we're all chasing Pinterest right now. I'm sure every single one of us on the panel is, you know, has the obligatory Pinterest idea the same way we have the obligatory iPhone idea. But you really need to have those things there. Is it a content platform play? Is there a behavior, or is this an environment that the brand can do interesting things in?
And I've noticed that with books too, where people are feeling like they have to, if they present a campaign and then they've got 4 boxes that they have to check beside it, like, and here's the iPhone app, and here's the Gorilla, you know, and you're like, well, thanks. I don't know why I'm looking at this because it doesn't really fit, but thanks. I know you can design a interface for an app. I think that I agree with what everybody has said. You should also know that there's a reality. I think, you know, Kim mentioned the Business Week cover, which I think occurs to all of us, or happens to all of us. But there's a reality that you are going to be asked to adhere take a campaign, extend it to a platform that you don't agree with, that you don't think is the right thing to do.
Sure.
And maybe it's because the executive vice president found out his kid was on Facebook and thought and your client doesn't want to do it, and you don't want to do it, and next thing you know, part of the budget's being carved out so you can do a Facebook promo. And you still have to make that work in some way, shape, or form for your dignity and for your client. You know, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing, even if the platform itself isn't right. You still got to make it work somehow.
Yeah.
Great, and I just wanted to address Kip. Yeah, the Pinterest thing. Yeah, the moment it came on, we're all over it, trying to make it work. But this is awkward, but I actually have my own experience with where I did take a technology or an experience, an API, and found it so fascinating that I did kind of back end or find a client to fit that technology, and it was the Google Street View. Where I just heard that the Google car was coming to Toronto via the Metro newspaper and got some Red M lentils in front windows of coworkers' homes, and then we did a kind of a Find Red sort of within Google Street View Toronto. So that's embarrassingly one where the technology did kind of lead, but I would argue that the behavior matched the client, because the client, M&M's is all about irresistible fun. So the fit was perfect because it was all about a scavenger hunt trying to find the red M. So it's one of those enigmas, I suppose.
Well, I just want to be clear too, because I hope I said it right. But I mean, being curious and experimenting with technologies because they seem cool or because they're hot is great as a creative exploration. The filter I was hoping to put out there is before you think it's a legitimate idea and you start circulating it, put it through the rigor of what behaviors is it supporting, is this a good environment. But the experimentation is absolutely right because Pinterest actually points it out. None of us, even most of us, I should say, especially since it's a panel of dudes, were aware of Pinterest because we weren't playing around with it, and now we're playing catch up. So I think the curiosity and experimentation can take you to good places, but when you think you've got a concept, or when you're trying to vet it, or you're trying to teach a team or show your creative director that you've actually thought this through, that's when you need those filters.
Fair enough. And actually, guys, I really apologize, but I have to go, duty calls and all that stuff. So pleasure talking with you guys, and all these people, they smell really good. All right, so thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rene.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Rene. We still have a couple of questions. Shane?
All right, so you can't really see me. I'm off camera right now. I'm kind of coming in a little bit. So my name is Shane. I have a question for you guys. You guys talk about, like Ron talks about stand-up comedy. You talk about reading these magazines and stuff. How do you guys balance your work-life relationship? And also, where do you guys draw inspiration from? I know a lot of people do annuals and stuff like that, but we also received advice to stay away from annuals because then we're going to be repeating stuff. So we heard the most creative thinkers, they don't actually refer to annuals. So where do you guys get your inspiration from? Stand-up comedy, movies, pop culture, and how do you guys form that into your ideas?
Well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Hunter. Let's go.
No, I mean, one of the things that, I'm really lucky in my role, and we're really lucky as an organization, is we're a global practice. And so, we get to work all over the world. We get to meet a lot of different kinds of people. We get to meet a lot of different kinds of designers. And, and so there's something inspiring for me, about being cosmopolitan and participating, for lack of a better way of putting it, in the construction of the 21st century. And you'd be amazed at how many times, just by being kind of in a global context, we'll be talking about some kind of digital installation or something. Someone, on our team will be like, "Oh, I just saw this thing in the Basel airport, that does this," and just that degree of kind of engagement in the world. It can't be replicated. There's not a conference that, obviously there are some good conferences and good speakers and great YouTube videos or whatever, but the experience of sort of being in the world at a moment in time and seeing it unfold in real time is a pretty unique opportunity. And I don't know if I would have the attention span to do it any other way.
Yeah, I don't, and I certainly don't go to stand-up comedy for inspiration for, advertising or content ideas.
You can.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
You can.
But I've always seen the two things as I use the exact same process, whether I'm writing a stand-up set or whether I'm creating a campaign or whatever. I agree with Hunter that you got to get out and see the world, and that's where the real inspiration is going to come from. And I know that sounds kind of wanky, but can you go to annuals? Sure, you can. You're probably going to end up with a 6 or a 7. You can do some good stuff with that. It's not going to be incredibly original, but you can still do some good stuff. I think the 10s, those things come from being out and being inspired by real life and real people, seeing a play and seeing a musician and whatever. The one thing I would caution you, though, is that 99.9% of the consumers that you're working for or working to connect with don't live on Queen West. And so we can get our inspiration from the things that interest us, but we don't want to necessarily parody those things, or we don't want to directly rip off those things. I've just seen far too many creatives come in and say, no, the person who buys Ritz crackers is going to love this obscure artist that I love, and that's not usually the case. But get out and live your life.
One thing I was going to add to that, because I'm actually sort of struggling with this now. I've been, in my last 3 years, I've been moving out of a creative role and into a strategic and planning and these other roles, and I become overwhelmed by the number of things that I need to stay on top of. And there's a great article in Wired magazine over the summer called How to Spot the Future, and I would recommend checking it out. But they have these things like look for cross-pollinators, look for deep design, spend time. My favorite one was spend time with time wasters, people whose passion is pushing them to do things that look like a complete waste of time because they're doing interesting things. But so, because it is tricky. It's just like, there's a certain kind of junk culture I like. There's certain brands, I still follow a lot of the stuff that I used to follow for Nike. But it gets to be too much sometimes, and it's difficult with the focus. And that article is really interesting around, like, where are you catching those signals out on the long tail that are actually going to turn into something? And I love the idea of cross-pollination and time wasting. So that's what I recommend. Waste a lot of time.
And Kip, that video from the Wired conference in New York is on the Wired site. We had
right.
Our team was watching Thomas Getz's talk yesterday. So, so you don't even have to read it, everyone. You can
just watch it.
You can waste time.
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I'd say surround yourself with intelligent and interesting people if you can possibly do that, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. The more you get out there and converse and learn about the world and get different points of view, the more ideas you're going to be able to come up with, and the more frame of references you're going to have as far as delivering message. But just physically get outside and look at stuff and dissect stuff. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs in a way, because literally every surface that I look at in the outside world is another medium that I think I might be able to use to create something interesting or something that hasn't been done before. So a light post and a garbage can and the sidewalk and a bag, blowing in the wind, all of those things, there's potential in that as far as that being the next advertising medium that's going to be interesting to someone. But not only physical objects. I mean, you can also study behaviors as well. I think Reddit is a really great place to go as far as finding little subcultures of people who take something super seriously, something that you may never have expected someone to take seriously. And it's through that dissection and through the learning that there's this subgroup of people who are really, really into, having a red pen and a blue pen in their pocket at the same time. That may be a ridiculous thing, but there could be an idea there or something that you can draw on in order to create something interesting. So try to dissect. I mean, look at things and try to see where there's an idea present in that random, seemingly inane thing.
And actually, in Hunter, you may have cut out, you cut out at the beginning, so I'm sorry if you already said this, but Bruce Mao had that great thing that fits right in with that idea of dissection, which is ask stupid questions. Find people that you can sort of ask the why, or does it need to be, because at the bottom of the T, there's still lots of stuff to discover, and when you sort of unpack what's really going on and catch the first principles of something or understand the behaviors, that thing of just asking is really, and that was the phrase Bruce used, like ask stupid questions. That can be a huge spark for discovery. Excellent. Just don't do it in an interview.
Yeah, I have some stories about that.
We have another question.
Hi, my name's Joey. I'd like to thank you guys again for all your answers so far. I just had a question, less so on where to get your ideas, but more on the path of, especially where we are. And you guys were talking about, I think Kip was talking about how between 2004 and 2012, advertising has expanded and changed so much, and we're trying to catch up with all the different things like Pinterest and whatnot. With people who are graduating or trying to break in, how would you, or what kind of advice would you give them in terms of trying to figure out where to expand their knowledge base, whether in digital or HTML5 and stuff like that? Like, a lot of us are concerned with print and broadcast and TV and stuff, but there's so many more realms to delve into, and it's kind of overwhelming, I guess, as a idea creator. So I don't know if that was concise enough, but there's just a lot of things to cover, so it's just really daunting, I guess.
I think this relates back to the whole idea of curiosity that was discussed before. I mean, I think a well-rounded creative is curious in about every medium and has the ability to think critically and create in every medium. I think digital is hugely important. I mean, I was lucky enough to get in that 2004 timeframe when the digital sort of creative industry was in its nascence and people didn't know what the hell digital was. And I was lucky enough to get in at the front door at that time where and develop a reputation for having an opinion that mattered in digital, which was great. But I was also pigeonholed in the sense that I was a digital creative solely and didn't have you know, the ability to create television campaigns or to create radio or to create anything else. Only through being in the industry and having creative directors willing to let me do those things did I manage to develop a portfolio that encompasses all of those mediums. I think my suggestion to you would be to not focus. I don't think focus is the right thing. I think being able to do everything is really important. And that's not to say you can't be particularly good at one thing, because if you are, that's fantastic. But if you do pigeonhole yourself in this industry, you're going to be left by the wayside, because the best creatives now coming out of school, and even the ones that are my creative directors who are 45, 50 years old, the best creatives are the ones who are open-minded and who are interested in learning about everything.
Robert Heinlein has a great line that specialization is for insects. So I think that's sort of what I hear when you caution about like over focus, but being sensitive to the fact that there are just so many things to try and keep track of now.
Sure.
I think two of the most important things, and I think Anthony, when you came up and visited, we did that 5-tool advertising person, is getting your head around design thinking. Whether whatever medium you're working in, it's very, very rare that you're working with a client who only wants one particular cultural object in one particular channel, and typically they're looking for a whole series of touch points that add up to some sort of value, and that's where you start to move into this idea of design thinking, which is it's kind of a BS word that gets thrown around a lot. But if you dig deep into it, this idea of like, okay, what's the system that the customer is moving through? How does the brand live? How does culture function within that system? I mean, there's a lot of rich stuff there, and I think that's what helps you sort of get your mind around adding these behaviors and environments together. Which sounds vague, but there is like some real literature out there around that.
Yeah, I know that there's you know, in people love to say, oh, I got a guy. Oh, you gotta paint your shed. I got a guy. Oh, you gotta fix your roof. I got a guy. Use my guy. You don't want to be a guy. You don't want to be the guy. So because you're like, how do we build this very specific thing that we want to pitch? Well, there's a guy, and I don't mean it to be that gender specific, obviously, but there's a person who does that, and that's all they do, and there's 100 of them. And so if that's what if you focus too much, then you just become that person. I would say focus on solving the problem with the tools at your disposal. And you know, I remember pitching. We built an art gallery for Volvo, and when I pitched to the president of Volvo that we're going to do this pop-up art gallery, and I kept pitching, and he wasn't buying it. And I said, what is the issue here? And he said, quite frankly, I don't think you know how to build an art gallery. And I said, I got to be honest with you, I don't know how to shoot a TV spot either. I don't know what lens to use, how to focus it. I have no idea how to do that. All I do is I come up with the idea and I protect the idea by bringing in the experts who can help execute it. With that mindset, you can really do anything, because you can always outsource the very specific execution of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my point would be related to that. I think there are two things that I would really encourage you to focus on in this sea of not focusing. One is narrative development. Really become good at developing narratives, because that not only is a skill you need to present yourself, your work, campaigns that resonate with people, but it's shocking how few people are good at it in the creative fields. The other, which I believe is maybe even more important than the narrative development, is be a good editor. We talked before about how many pages you can cut out of your deck, to edit to amplify. But unfortunately or fortunately, I've made a career because so many organizations are terrible at developing their narratives and editing down to get to their key themes that resonate with their customers. So it's like those are two things that I think most people, they want to learn the next kind of programming language or whatever it is, learn which lens to use. It's like, learn how to tell a story and learn how to edit.
Just in relation to that story idea, because I think that's so hugely important. The development of narrative is incredibly important. I mean, just when you're developing, say, a television spot, that narrative in that spot is obviously important, but I think we live in a day and age where advertising is no longer relegated to a single medium, and we've heard talk about transmedia advertising and transmedia storytelling. It's a word that a lot of people use now, but a narrative isn't just about telling a story in a specific space. A narrative also relates to how you tell the story in different spaces and how those all relate together. So the initial question was all about, well, where do I focus? Well, the best work that's coming out right now is the work that is everywhere. It inhabits every space that you live in. It inhabits the internet. It inhabits your mobile device. It inhabits your television, your radio. It inhabits print. It inhabits the sky. There's a plane coming by with a little thing on the side of it. I mean, that lives everywhere. And all of those little elements are telling a part of a bigger story. And I think that that's the real future of advertising, is how all of those little parts come together to tell a really full and rich story about a particular brand or a brand idea.
And actually, I know I'm going twice on this question, but Laurent, just highlight something. When you talked earlier about digital having a real utility kind of focus, one of the last projects I worked on at RGA was Nike Plus, and Adweek called it the digital campaign of the decade. And I always point to that and say, there was nothing campaign-like about that. It was actually a product, and in fact, it was to the point that you actually bought it and put it in your shoe. And the reason I'm highlighting that is I think there's this level too where we need to start to look beyond what we think of as advertising, and think of ourselves as being in like marketing services, and think of other brand behaviors, because there are so many of these objects out there that win ad awards. But to be able to think, once you've done your book and you've spent so much time in the industry, spent so much time perfecting a certain part of the craft, finding some way to sort of broaden that definition of advertising.
And even the name advertising is so ugly these days. I mean, it's viewed that way. And so the term we kept hearing we had an advisory committee last night, and it was all about communication and engagement. Those were the two key words. Even in our planning to move forward with curriculum changes, etc., the concentration around being media agnostic, or have the idea build into the various platforms rather than being specific to a media vehicle. And communication and engagement is the bottom line. Communicate a message and get the engagement. Sorry, Kip.
Sorry about that. But I'm also finding more people using the phrase brand building, because brand does have that ethereal kind of emotional piece and cultural piece, and you are building it, but you can build it through utility. So communication, engagement, because you've seen like story, utility, message, function. But there is something around, our job still is to build a brand more than it is to build a product, and that actually helps me make sense of Nike Plus, because it's not their main product, and it's really a driver to their bigger profitable areas, but it does build the brand, and it lives up to the brand through communication, through certain engagement, and through utility. Just throwing that out there. It's probably too late, but...
So, Kip, do you think next year on this panel it will be 4 branding guys and 1 advertising guy?
Oh, that's... I don't fit in any of those, so you'll be spared.
That might be the case in 2 weeks. We have a couple more questions just before we call it a day, because we promised to get you out of here by 3-ish. So the first person that we want to get a question out of is the gentleman who actually helped put this entire concept together, Mehdi Mullah Hassani, who will start off with a question.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming by. This is a little bit of a product placement, I guess you could say, Seneca. But my question is actually that, a good thing that we just mentioned, talking about 1 guy branding and 4 guys from advertising. Like the way I like to look at it, or at least what I like to do once I finish school, is I like to sort of be a problem solver. And so I don't want to sort of be like tied down to one particular direction. And my question is like, how would you go through your process and not be tied to just thinking in advertising, or in in Hunter's case, when it comes to branding. Maybe the solution could be architecture, maybe economics, maybe politics, right? So are we limiting ourselves in a way, and is that something that just we cannot avoid?
Well, I think you just have to, again, you have to solve the problem. One of the earliest examples of this, when IDEO was tasked with doing a campaign to get kids to brush their teeth more, and they looked at all the data and the research and everything, and what they realized was that kids actually didn't need a campaign, they needed a toothbrush that they could actually grasp. And so IDEO went out and made a toothbrush with a thicker handle, which is a great example of great insight and great creative thinking and execution. But I don't know that if you're a junior copywriter at a large international network, I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't say that you don't have those opportunities, but it's dependent on the environment that you're working in.
Actually, I'm with you. I'm with where I think Ron may have been coming from. I think there are some places that are really, really good at doing TV, and there's always going to be a huge need for that. And I'm always nervous when I hear those kind of shops talking about, oh, but we're just problem solvers and solution builders. It's like, well, no, actually, you're magnificent television commercial makers, and you should celebrate that. And this may also go back to the question of like getting your start. If being able to solve problems that are kind of wide-ranging, that may actually narrow down the agencies you want to focus on and stock and get into, because every agency out there is going to say we're channel neutral, we like to solve problems, we do this and that, but most of them have sweet spots that they're actually really good at, and and they're increasingly having self-awareness, and that may be one of the ways to sort of help you figure out which agencies to go after. Don't chase an agency that rhymes with McCann Erickson with consultative ideas, because they do what they do and they do it well. So I tend to, I don't know, I'm a little bit curmudgeonly about parts of that. There are some agencies that really choose to be problem solvers at the beginning, and they're structured that way, and they have the culture. If that's what you want, you should find them and go after them, but to have some guardrails, in terms of taking that seriously.
Yeah, one thing that we talk about in terms of our own organization in relation to our competition is essentially, even just to be in the game, you have to assume that these people are good storytellers, they're good problem solvers. So to own that as a potential differentiator doesn't always work. So what is there after that? And in our case, we feel there's a research-driven set of insights that allow us to have kind of a unique perspective. We've curated a team which then allows us to drive kind of more innovative design outputs. So, in our case, it's research, talent, and the caliber of design. So, I think the thing you need to ask yourself is, if everyone else is a problem solver and a storyteller and all these things, what is it that really makes you stand out? What's the thing that is your differentiator? And maybe this goes back a little bit to Kip's kind of T-shaped person thing. What is that the stroke that the T stands on that makes you unique? Because you do have to articulate that. Sooner or later, and with clearer articulation around that, that's when the opportunities to do things on a kind of more ambitious scale come along with it, I think. Also, the other thing around that is relationships. It's pretty rare that you're able to talk about politics, culture, or whatever right off the bat. Now, if you establish a strong relationship with a client or organization and you're working with them for 5 or 10 years, now a lot of things are in play because they trust that the basics are going to be covered. Those boxes are going to be checked and, on that list. So where else can you push it now? Can you do an art gallery for Volvo? I mean, I don't know if Ron went in there on day one with that idea, or that was after a 5-year collaboration where there was enough of a trust to the Volvo president to even have that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Hunter, that on building trust, and with that comes being honest. we did a thing with Triscuit. We were going to record a song for a commercial, and we were going to release the song as a single before the commercial went to air. And the client said, you know, why would I do this? And I said, well, because there's a 0.00001% chance that the song will be a hit. Chances are that you're going to waste $10,000 totally, and this is going to go nowhere. But let's do some marketing R&D here. Let's test it out and see what we learn from it. But know that going in that we're flushing this money down the drain, but that it will better inform choices we make in the future. And that honesty goes a long way to when you really want to sell them on a great idea, that they really do trust your instinct, and that you're not selling them. You're actually doing what's right for their business.
Yeah. There are, of course, those agencies who are just known for doing that exact thing. We're known for just doing that outside-the-box, interesting, once-in-a-lifetime idea. I mean, if you want to set your sights on going to Droga right away, go for it. I mean, that's a great goal to have. But most agencies don't have that kind of relationship with their client. Most agencies don't have the trust of that the clients that Droga have for the agency. So you're more. I agree with the panel completely. I mean, you need to develop that relationship before you can come out and have those kinds of ideas, or you can have the best book I've ever seen and go straight to New York.
And too often we hear that trust really is a four-letter word. So to wrap, we're still here? Yes, we're still here. Sorry, we just had something show up on the screen. So to close us off for today, last question that was submitted to us from one of us is the challenge to the industry. If you could challenge this industry with a single one challenge, or maybe there's multiple challenges you have in your mind for change over the next few years, what is that challenge that you would throw out to the industry to do a little differently to reshape itself?
Mine's quick. Self-awareness and flexibility around mental models. Everyone I see trying to change for the new stuff, they're really just doing the old thing and running into new walls.
Mine would be the platform. Instead of trying to work on other people's platforms, let's create our own. I mean, we have the technology, we have the people who are smart enough to create them. Advertising agencies don't need to just sell space. We can sell ideas that live in space. We can build the platforms that the stuff lives in also.
I would say stop selling and start solving problems together with clients, and have those relationships.
Actually, Ron, you completely broke up.
Oh, sorry. I would say stop selling and start thinking.
Yeah, mine would be related to that, which is just embrace authenticity in a fairly radical way. The organizations and platforms, frankly, that have embraced an authentic, kind of transparent position are the ones that are in a very good position to sustain themselves over the next generation.
And sorry, Ron, you had cut in and out on us, so could you just recap again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say stop selling and start thinking and start collaborating with your clients and redefine that relationship so that we can all get to a better place. Excellent. Gentlemen?
I'm tweeting that one right now. Thanks.
So that's at Ron Tite, T-I-T.
I've been tweeting throughout, Kip, so.
Well, Kip, when you said that people should hang out with more time wasters, I changed it briefly when I tweeted it and said, Kip told the class of Seneca to smoke more pot.
That works too. Thank you. You saved me some time.
and the way the administration already feels about me, that was really good of you, Ron. So you're looking for an art director soon? My resume's filed. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Well spent in our view. So please, Kip, I look forward to seeing you in New York shortly, definitely in the fall. And Ron, always great to bump into you when we see each other. Hunter, nice to have met you. And Laurent, same thing.
Thank you very much.
Great work.
Thanks.
So thank you very much, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll